I grew up in a small town in Ohio, where people believed family was everything. My parents said it all the time. Family comes first. But somehow, I never really felt like I was part of that family. It wasn't that they were cruel to me. It was the little things. The things that slowly made me realize I was never their favorite. My brother, Ryan, was the light of their world. He was loud, funny, and always in the spotlight. Everyone loved him, teachers, neighbors, even the kids at school. He could get away with anything. When he got into fights or skipped classes, Mom would say, "Boys will be boys." When he crashed Dad's truck at 17, they actually comforted him like he was the victim. Meanwhile, when I came home with straight A's, they'd just say, "Good, that's expected," and move on. I learned early not to expect praise. I kept my head down, worked hard, and tried to make them proud in other ways. I helped around the house, cooked dinner when Mom worked late, and even covered for Ryan when he forgot his chores. But the truth is, no matter what I did, it was never enough. After high school, Ryan barely passed while I earned a full scholarship to college. I thought, maybe now they'll finally see me differently. But when I told them the news, Mom's first reaction wasn't excitement. It was worry about Ryan. "You're leaving soon," she said. "Who's going to help your brother with his applications?" I wanted to scream. I had just told them I'd gotten into my dream school, and all they could think about was him. Still, I stayed quiet. I went to college, graduated early, and started a stable job. I called home often, sent money when Dad's health started to decline, and even helped Ryan pay off a few of his bills. I didn't do it for gratitude. I did it because I believed that's what family was supposed to do. But every visit home reminded me where I stood. Mom and Dad always talked about Ryan, his new car, his new girlfriend, his big ideas. When I mentioned a promotion at work, they'd smile politely and then change the subject. Ryan was the golden one, and I was just there. I tried not to let it bother me, but deep down it did. It hurt to feel invisible in my own family. It hurt to realize that the people I loved most never truly saw me. Still, I kept showing up, trying to earn their love like it was something I could win if I worked hard enough. I didn't know it then, but that was the biggest mistake I'd ever make, believing that love was something I had to prove. Because soon, life would show me just how far my family's favoritism could go, and how it would change everything I thought I knew about them, and about myself. When Dad passed away, I thought it would be a time for us to finally come together. Losing him was hard enough. I didn't want to lose my family too. I told myself that grief might soften things between us, that maybe Mom and Ryan would finally see how much we needed each other. But I was wrong. His death didn't bring us closer. It pulled us further apart. The day of the will reading still feels like a blur. We were sitting in Dad's lawyer's office, the air heavy and silent. I remember staring at a framed photo of him on the lawyer's desk, trying to hold back tears. I kept thinking about all the nights I spent on the phone with him while he was sick, the bills I helped pay, and the comfort I tried to give from miles away. I thought he knew how much I cared. But when the lawyer began reading the will, my whole world shifted. Every single thing, the family house, Dad's savings, his life insurance, and even the old car he loved, was left to Ryan. My name wasn't even mentioned. Not once. I sat there frozen, unable to process what I was hearing. I looked at Mom, expecting her to be just as surprised, but she wasn't. She didn't even look upset. When I finally managed to ask why, she gave me a soft smile and said, "You understand, honey. Ryan needs stability. You're strong. You'll manage." Those words broke something inside me. For years, I'd convinced myself that their favoritism didn't mean they loved me less, that they just didn't know how to show it. But in that moment, I realized I'd been lying to myself. They never saw me as equal. I wasn't the one who needed help, and in their eyes, that meant I didn't deserve anything. I didn't say a word after that. I just sat there, staring at the papers, trying to feel something other than emptiness. Ryan was grinning like a kid on Christmas morning, already talking about how he'd take care of things, now that the house was his. He didn't even look at me. Not once. When it was over, I walked outside and sat in my car for a long time. I couldn't even cry. I wasn't angry yet, just numb. It felt like all those years of being overlooked had led to this one moment. It was as if Dad's final act had confirmed everything I had always feared. That no matter what I did, I would never be chosen. But as I sat there, something inside me started to shift. The pain turned into something sharper, quieter but stronger. I didn't know it yet, but that was the moment I stopped trying to belong. Something deep inside whispered that this wasn't just about a will or money. It was about years of being unseen finally coming to light. And for the first time in my life, I decided I wouldn't let them define my worth ever again. About a month after the will was read, I went back to my parents' house to collect a few of Dad's old things. Mom had asked me to help clear out his study. It was painful walking into that room. His chair was still pushed back like he'd just stood up, and the faint smell of his cologne still lingered in the air. I thought I'd just take a few keepsakes and leave quietly. But instead, I found something that changed everything. While going through his desk drawers, I came across a small box filled with folders and old paperwork. Most of it looked routine, bills, receipts, and hospital documents. But one folder caught my eye. It was labeled with my name. Inside were copies of bank transfers, all from my account, payments I had sent to help with Dad's medical expenses. I had sent money every month without thinking twice, believing both Ryan and I were sharing the responsibility. But then I saw it, the column showing who else had contributed. Under Ryan's name, it said 0. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake. Maybe there were other records somewhere. Maybe Ryan had helped in a different way. But as I flipped through page after page, it was clear. I had been the one carrying the weight while he did nothing. I sat there staring at those papers, my hands shaking. All those nights I skipped dinners out, all those months I'd worked overtime just to send money. And Ryan hadn't given a single dollar. But that wasn't the worst part. As I kept digging, I found a printed stack of emails tucked under an old notebook. They were between Mom, Ryan, and Dad. The subject line read, "The Will." My heart started pounding as I read them. Ryan was begging Dad to make sure everything stays in the family, saying I would move away and forget them once she gets busy with her career. Mom had replied, agreeing that Ryan needed the house and savings more. It felt like a punch to the chest. My own mother, the person I'd trusted the most, had helped convince Dad to change everything. I wasn't forgotten by accident. I was erased on purpose. I remember sitting there in silence, staring at the computer screen, feeling something break deep inside me. For years, I had tried to believe their choices were just misunderstandings, that maybe I was overreacting or too sensitive. But this was proof. They hadn't just favored Ryan. They'd lied to me, manipulated Dad, and stolen what was rightfully mine. The sadness I'd been carrying turned cold. The numbness disappeared, replaced by something stronger, anger. Not the kind that makes you scream, but the kind that settles deep in your chest and hardens you. That day, I walked out of the study knowing one thing for sure. They had betrayed me in a way that couldn't be undone. And if they thought I would just walk away quietly, they were wrong. Very wrong. After finding those papers and emails, something inside me changed completely. The pain had burned through me, and what was left was calm. The kind that comes when you finally stop expecting anything from people who have already shown you who they are. I didn't argue with them. I didn't confront Mom or Ryan. I just decided to walk away. Quietly. Around that time, I got a job offer from a company in Seattle. It was a position I had once dreamed about, one that Dad had helped me prepare for back when he believed in me. Accepting it felt right, like closing a door that had been half open for too long. So, I packed my bags, left Ohio, and didn't look back. Seattle was cold and rainy, but in a strange way, it felt peaceful. I rented a small apartment, threw myself into work, and started saving every dollar I could. I didn't spend money on things I didn't need. I wanted security, something I'd never really had. Ryan called a few times in the beginning, pretending to check in, but it always ended with him asking for money. Once it was for a car payment, another time it was because he'd lost his job again. Every time, I told him I couldn't help. His voice would harden, and he'd hang up without saying goodbye. Mom's calls were worse. She had a way of making everything sound like my fault. She'd say things like, "You know how much your brother's been struggling," or "Your father would have wanted you to look out for him." When guilt didn't work, she tried pity. "He just needs time, sweetheart." I listened, but I didn't give in. I was done being their safety net. But while they thought I was just moving on with my life, I was quietly looking deeper into Dad's old company files. The same ones I'd found in his study. I wanted to understand everything about the trust fund, not because I cared about the money anymore, but because I needed to know the truth. That's when I found something unexpected, a loophole. Hidden in the legal language was a clause about the trust fund's management rights. It mentioned that as the executor, I still had partial authority over certain assets connected to Dad's old business investments. Ryan had no idea. I remember reading that line over and over again, feeling a strange mix of disbelief and clarity. For the first time, I realized I had a kind of power they didn't know about. Not the kind that destroys, but the kind that restores balance. The kind that says, you can't take everything from me. So I stayed quiet. I kept working, saving, and planning. I didn't want revenge out of anger. I wanted justice, calm, measured, and completely legal. They had taken everything they thought mattered. But soon, they were going to learn that what they'd stolen wasn't theirs to keep. It took months of careful planning before I decided to act. I didn't rush anything. I wanted to make sure I understood every part of that trust, every rule, every loophole, every piece of fine print that Ryan had ignored. The more I read, the more I realized how careless they had been. They thought I was gone for good, living quietly in Seattle, still hurt but harmless. But they didn't know I was the only one who could actually touch the money they were living off. Dad's trust had been set up in a very specific way. It was meant to protect the assets he built through his business. Any sale, withdrawal, or liquidation required two signatures, the beneficiary and the executor. Ryan was the beneficiary, but I was still listed as the executor. That meant he couldn't sell or transfer anything without my approval. The irony almost made me laugh. They had worked so hard to push me out, to make sure I got nothing. But in the end, I was the one holding the key to everything they thought they owned. So, I did what they never expected. I took control. I started by contacting Dad's old financial advisor. He remembered me well and still respected me for all the times I had handled payments during Dad's illness. When I explained the situation and showed him the documents proving my legal authority, he didn't question me. Within weeks, I had access to every account and asset connected to the trust. The house, the car, the remaining investments, everything. One by one, I began liquidating them. It wasn't out of revenge. It was about reclaiming what was rightfully tied to Dad's legacy, not Ryan's greed. The family house was the first to go. Then came the business shares and the savings account. Each sale was done quietly, legally, and without a single word to Ryan or Mom. They had ignored every letter from the trust office because they never bothered to read the fine print. When everything was finalized, I didn't keep the money for myself. That would have made me no better than them. Instead, I created a new charitable trust in Dad's name, the Michael Thompson Foundation. It was designed to fund scholarships for students in financial need, something Dad had always talked about doing but never got the chance to. When the last document was signed, I sat alone in my apartment and felt a calm I hadn't felt in years. I hadn't taken from them. I had simply redirected what they tried to steal. I honored Dad in the way he deserved to be remembered, not the way they twisted his memory for their own gain. They thought they'd left me with nothing, but I ended up with everything that truly mattered: control, peace, and the satisfaction of knowing the legacy my father built was finally in the right hands. It didn't take long for them to find out. A few weeks after the final transfer was complete, I got a call from Ryan in the middle of the night. His voice was filled with rage. He was shouting so fast I could barely understand him. All I caught was, "What did you do?" And "The accounts are empty." I didn't respond. I just hung up. The next morning, they showed up at my apartment in Seattle without warning. I'll never forget the sound of their knocking, hard, angry, desperate. When I opened the door, Mom pushed past me first, her face red with fury. Ryan followed right behind her, pacing like a caged animal. Mom didn't even take a breath before she started yelling. "You ruined your brother's life," she screamed, her voice trembling. "How could you do this to your own family?" I stood there calm. For the first time in my life, I didn't flinch. I looked at her and said quietly, "No, Mom. You did, when you chose him over me." That stopped her for a second, but Ryan jumped in before she could speak. He started waving papers in my face, printouts from the trust, the bank, and some legal forms he clearly didn't understand. "I'll sue you," he shouted. "You had no right to touch what Dad left me." I told him to go ahead and try. I explained clearly and without emotion that everything I did was legal. As executor, I had every right to manage and redistribute the funds according to the trust's terms. The money hadn't gone to me. It had gone into a foundation under Dad's name. I showed them the proof, the documents, and the registration details. Ryan snatched the papers from my hands and read them in silence. I could see the moment the truth hit him, the realization that there was nothing he could do. The trust was sealed, and the funds were no longer his. Not a single cent could be taken back. Mom sank into a chair, her anger turning into disbelief. "You always were cold," she whispered. "Your father would never forgive you for this." I looked at her and said softly, He would forgive me for protecting his name. Can you say the same? Ryan stormed out, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. Mom stayed a few minutes longer, muttering under her breath about betrayal and family. I didn't argue. There was nothing left to say. Eventually, she left too, leaving behind only silence. When the door closed, I stood there for a long time. I thought I would feel guilt or sadness, but I didn't. What I felt was peace. Not happiness, just quiet peace, the kind that comes when you finally stop fighting for people who never fought for you. For the first time, I realized I wasn't the weak one. I had simply learned how to walk away without looking back. After that day, I didn't hear from them for a while. The silence was strange at first, but peaceful. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to explain myself or try to fix anything. I had done what I needed to do, and now it was their turn to live with the choices they made. It didn't take long for things to fall apart on their end. The house, the same one Ryan had bragged about owning, was gone within a few months. He couldn't afford the maintenance, the taxes, or the lifestyle he had built on money that was never really his. The car he loved so much was repossessed soon after. From what I later heard, Mom had moved in with him to help him get back on his feet. But all it did was make both of them miserable. They were living off small jobs and borrowed money, barely keeping up. Meanwhile, my life in Seattle began to bloom in ways I never expected. I focused on my work, poured myself into projects, and before long I started my own consulting business. The same skills they once dismissed, the attention to detail, the discipline, the independence, became the reason my business grew. I started getting clients who trusted me, respected me, and valued my opinions. For the first time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. It was strange how different everything felt without the weight of their judgment. I didn't have to prove anything to anyone. I could finally make choices just for me. I traveled when I wanted, decorated my apartment how I liked, and spent weekends reading or walking by the water. It was simple, but it was mine. Every now and then, I'd get a call from Mom. Most times, I didn't pick up. Sometimes, I'd stare at her name on my phone, wondering if I should answer. But then I'd remember the look on her face during the will reading, the lies she told Dad, and how easily she had dismissed me when it suited her. I'd remember that she wasn't calling because she missed me. She was calling because she needed something. One evening, I got a voicemail from her. Her voice sounded tired. She said, "I hope you're happy now." I listened to it twice and then deleted it. I didn't feel angry or guilty. I just felt done. It's not that I stopped caring altogether. A part of me would always wish things had been different. But I also knew that going back would mean betraying myself again, and I had worked too hard to rebuild my life to ever do that. For the first time, I wasn't living for their approval, their love, or their forgiveness. I was finally living for myself, and that was enough. A few months later, I came home from work to find an envelope in my mailbox. The handwriting on it was shaky but familiar. It was from Mrs. Campbell, our old neighbor back in Ohio. She had known our family for years, the kind of woman who noticed everything but never judged. I hadn't heard from her since Dad's funeral, so seeing her name caught me off guard. I made some tea and sat down before opening it. Inside was a short letter, written neatly in blue ink. She said she hoped I was doing well, and that she thought about my father often. Then, her words shifted to Mom and Ryan. She mentioned how she sometimes saw them around town, struggling, bitter, and still talking about me. She wrote, "Your mother says you turned your back on them, that you destroyed the family after your father passed. But I remember things differently. I saw how hard you tried, and I know how they treated you. Don't let their words hurt you." I sat quietly after reading that. I could almost hear Mrs. Campbell's gentle voice saying those words, the same way she used to talk to me when I was a kid. It was strange. After everything that had happened, I didn't feel angry or even hurt anymore. Just tired and maybe a little sad. They were still blaming me, still painting themselves as victims, and it didn't surprise me. It was easier for them to point fingers than to face the truth. But what struck me most was how little their opinion mattered now. The power their voices once had over me was gone. I folded the letter carefully and placed it on my desk. For a moment, I thought about writing back, explaining my side, maybe defending myself. But then I stopped. There was no need. I didn't owe anyone an explanation anymore. The truth was already out there, whether they wanted to see it or not. That night, I sat by the window, watching the city lights and thinking about everything that had happened. For so long, I'd thought revenge meant fighting back, proving them wrong, or making them pay for what they did. But now I realized it wasn't about that at all. It was about peace, the kind that comes from walking away and letting life do the work for you. Justice had already been served in its quiet way. Not through shouting, not through anger, but through truth. The kind of truth that always finds its way out, no matter how much people try to bury it. As I looked out at the skyline, I felt something lift off my shoulders. I finally understood. I hadn't destroyed the family. They had done that themselves long before I acted. I had simply stopped pretending to hold it together. And that, more than anything, was what set me free. Years went by before I found the courage to visit Dad's grave. For a long time, I told myself I didn't need to go back, that there was nothing left for me in that town. But one quiet Sunday morning, something inside me shifted. It wasn't guilt or sadness. It was more like closure calling me home. So I booked a flight, rented a car, and drove to the small cemetery where he was buried. The sky was gray, the kind of soft, cloudy gray that made everything feel still. As I walked between the rows of headstones, memories came back, not the painful ones, but the quiet moments. Dad teaching me how to ride a bike. The late nights we spent talking about my future. The times he'd smile at me like I was his whole world. Those were the moments I chose to hold on to. When I reached his grave, I stood there for a long time, not knowing what to say. The grass around the stone had grown high, and the edges were starting to fade. I knelt down and brushed off the dirt, tracing his name with my fingers. It felt strange, being there after everything that had happened. There was no anger left, no resentment. Just a kind of peace I hadn't known before. I placed a single white rose on the stone, the same kind Mom used to keep in the garden. My voice was quiet when I finally spoke. "You raised me better than they ever saw," I whispered. "And I'm okay now. I promise." For a long moment, I just stood there, letting the silence say the rest. I forgave him right then, not because he asked for it, but because I needed to. I forgave him for not seeing the truth while he was alive, for trusting the wrong people, for leaving me to clean up what was broken. I knew he hadn't meant to hurt me. He was just blinded by love, by hope, by the idea that family always sticks together. As I turned to leave, I felt lighter than I had in years. There were no more what-ifs left in me. No more bitterness. The past was finally behind me, and I didn't need to carry it anymore. The wind picked up as I walked back to the car, brushing against my face like a quiet goodbye. I looked up one last time at the gray sky and smiled. I knew he'd be proud, not because I'd won or proved anything, but because I had survived, healed, and learned to forgive. By the time I drove away, I wasn't just leaving the cemetery. I was leaving the last piece of pain behind. And for the first time, I truly felt free. Today, my life looks nothing like it did back then. I wake up every morning in a small but beautiful house surrounded by calm and silence. My days start with coffee by the window and end with peace in my heart, something I never had when I was trying to please everyone else. I built this life on my own, step by step, with no help, no shortcuts, and no guilt. And for the first time, I can say I'm proud of the woman I became. My business is doing better than I ever imagined. What started as a small consulting job from my kitchen table has now grown into a company that helps others find stability and direction. The same skills my family once mocked me for, being too careful, too organized, too serious, are now the very reasons I've succeeded. I learned to trust myself again, to believe that I was enough without anyone's approval. Sometimes I still get updates about Ryan and Mom through old neighbors or social media. Ryan hops from one job to another, always blaming someone else for his problems. Mom mostly keeps to herself. They never apologized, and honestly, I don't expect them to. I used to think I needed their apology to move on, but now I know I don't. My peace doesn't depend on them anymore. I no longer feel the need to prove anything. For years, I wanted them to see my worth, to finally admit that I was the one who stood by Dad, the one who worked hard, the one who deserved better. But the truth is, I don't need them to see it. I see it myself. That's enough. Life has a strange way of giving you back what you give to it. I gave pain, I received lessons. I gave effort, I received success. I gave forgiveness, I received peace. That's what growth feels like, not loud or dramatic, but steady and quiet. Every now and then I look at old photos, not to feel sad, but to remember how far I've come. I'm no longer that girl waiting to be chosen, waiting to be loved the right way. I chose myself, and that choice changed everything. I don't hate my family. Hate would mean they still have power over me, and they don't. I just don't owe them my time, my energy, or my forgiveness. I've learned that walking away can be an act of love, love for yourself. Because in the end, the best revenge isn't hurting the people who hurt you. It's living a life so beautiful, so fulfilled, that they can't stand to look at it without seeing what they lost. And that's exactly what I did. I built a life worth living, not out of spite, but out of strength. And that, more than anything, is my victory.